Today's video is sponsored by MIDI Health. Now, I know a lot of women around my age are starting to experience perimenopause and later menopause and feeling a little in the dark. You may be dealing with weight gain, hot flashes or night sweats, moodiness, or maybe you just feel different. Don't accept it as just another part of aging because I have a solution. I want to introduce you to MIDI Health. MIDI is a virtual care clinic providing compassionate, high-quality medical care for women, and yes, they take insurance for both visits and prescriptions. You can enjoy no-rush virtual visits from the comfort and privacy of your own home. You get prescriptions shipped straight to your door, and they're accepted by major insurance plans across all 50 states. MIDI treats a wide range of health concerns for women from perimenopause and menopause to weight management and so much more. The process is super easy. Just add your info, book a virtual visit, and meet with a clinician to chat about your symptoms, and then she will come up with a custom care plan. If any testing is needed, they'll set it up at a local center for you. You can then schedule convenient virtual follow-ups as needed to fine-tune your treatment. So if you're wondering what's going on with your hormones, I understand. There just isn't that much information out there, let alone support. I would highly recommend MIDI because not only are they experts, but they care and they have real solutions, which you deserve to feel great. So if you're looking for personalized, compassionate care covered by insurance, then click my link below to book your first MIDI visit.
As I'm diving deep.
My head is on the water. I thought I didn't need you, but when I dropped it slowly, I realized that I've been missing you like crazy. My head is on the water, 'cause I thought I didn't need you. My lungs are out of air now, 'cause I realize I've been missing you like crazy. See you.
On May 8, 2008, around 8:45 p.m., 911 received a very frantic phone call from a homeowner in Las Vegas, Nevada.
911 emergency, Hernandez, 842.
My wife's been shot and there's a guy in my house that I shot him.
Is he hurt too? Is he hurt too?
I hope she's dead.
Okay.
My wife's hurt.
What's your name? What's your name, sir?
Tom.
Where is your wife in the house?
She's in the hall in the bedroom. She's been shot bad.
Okay. Where is she shot at, do you know?
Yeah, I think in the head. I was going to move her over and start doing this. She's been awesome. I don't know what to do exactly.
The man on the phone, Tom Randolph, said that he and his wife Sharon had just come back from a night out. Nothing crazy, it involved a dinner at a nearby casino, and then they went home. While Tom was picking the car up in the garage, his wife went inside the house. She was on her way to the bedroom, and to get there, she had to walk down a hallway that ran by their home office. Tom came inside less than a minute later after his wife, only to find her lying down on the floor in that hallway. At first, he thought that she had tripped, maybe had a bad fall. He called her name a few times, but she didn't get up, and she didn't react. It was then that Tom realized that there was somebody else inside the house. He could see the intruder's shadow move in the bedroom at the end of the hall. The good news was Tom kept a gun in the house for protection, so he immediately went to grab it. The man tried to run past him to get out through the garage, but Tom, acting on instinct, shot him over and over and over again. The intruder didn't drop, though. He kept pushing forward, stumbling, and he made his way out to the garage. And that whole time, Tom kept shooting. He even hit this guy twice in the head just to make sure that he wasn't going to turn around and attack. By the time that Tom called 911, he seemed very freaked out about the entire thing.
What to do exactly?
Okay. And is the guy still in the house, do you know?
So he's in the garage. He pushed me by and ran on out. I know it. He stripped me off. He tried to rip me off.
Do you know what his name is?
Mike, I don't know his last name.
Does he wear any black Hispanic?
Black How old does he have? I don't know, 40s. He's laying on the ground, he didn't get up? Yeah. He's laying on the ground, he didn't get up? He's in the garage. I gotta comfort you with medical too, okay? Don't hang up.
Now, you just heard Tom tell that dispatcher he knew the man he shot, Michael Miller, or Mike. He had been working around the house as a handyman for several months. Tom and his wife trusted him, but now Mike had apparently broken in, robbed them, and shot at them. Tom told the operator that his wife was bleeding. She was hurt badly, and he begged for somebody to come and help her. Well, unfortunately, as soon as the police got there, they pronounced Sharon dead at the scene. Mike was dead too, and his body was in the garage. The detectives found a ski mask that was close to where his body had fallen. He also had a bag with him that was full of all of these random items from around the house. Things like jewelry, but it was Sharon's costume pieces. It wasn't worth a whole lot of money. The house was a mess, like what you would expect after a robbery. Drawers were pulled out, things were thrown everywhere, that type of thing. So it seemed like a fairly simple case. Mike, who was familiar with the house and with Tom and Sharon, broke in on a night that he knew that they were out intending to rob them. Sharon and Tom surprised him during the burglary, and then he shot Sharon after being discovered. Tom then shot Mike in self-defense before calling the police. It was all a tragic end, and it was all an end to a marriage that was still only just the beginning. See, Sharon and Tom had met online through a dating website just a couple of years before, in 2006. Sharon was recently widowed. Her second husband had passed away in 2005 after 27 years of marriage. This left Sharon single in her mid-50s. She still had a lot to offer, though. She was a very thoughtful, funny person. She had short, curly hair, a big smile. Originally from New Jersey, she ended up moving to Las Vegas for a better job, not only for her, but also for her young daughter, Colleen, who was still just a little girl. After getting her cosmetologist license, she worked as a hairdresser until retirement. Once she found herself out of work and with way more time to focus on her love life, that's when she found Tom, who seemed to be exactly what Sharon was looking for. She showed her friends pictures of her new man, looking adventurous, handsome, sitting on a motorcycle. Tom was striking. He had a round face, almost this delicate, feminine type looking features, and it made him look younger. He had long blonde hair that was almost white. It hung in curls halfway down his back. I mean, he kind of looked like a cover model from some sort of paperback romance novel, something like that. Like you would spot him on a beach, riding a horse, something like that. And his life also kind of felt like something out of one of those stories. He had a boat, he had a motorcycle, and he took Sharon out on both of them all of the time. There were always plenty of things to do in Vegas, and the two of them went to concerts and different restaurants pretty frequently. Sharon introduced Tom to her daughter Colleen, who was surprised by their relationship, but was impressed with how happy he seemed to make her mom. In 2006, during a cruise down to Baja California with stops in Mexico, Tom and Sharon decided to get married. It was a shock to her friends and family, but there was no denying that Sharon seemed happy with her new partner. In fact, the two of them said their vows in Las Vegas the following years in 2007, really cementing their relationship. So the fact that Sharon had just recently found her new love made it all the more heartbreaking that she had died so violently and so unexpectedly. She had just spent a nice evening out with her husband, and then her life was taken so callously in her own home. It was devastating for her friends and family, especially because she still had so much to live for. Her daughter, Colleen, now had 2 sons, but she was pregnant with her first daughter, and Sharon was so excited to have a granddaughter. And now she would never get the chance to meet the baby. So the police began their investigation to find out what exactly happened the night of Sharon's murder. They interviewed Tom, who repeated what he had told that 911 operator. He said he didn't hear Sharon get shot because he is fairly deaf. He just walked into the house and found her there on the ground. And he also shot that intruder multiple times as this man tried to escape running through the garage. But there was an issue that investigators noticed almost immediately. On the 911 call, Tom said that he had heard a shot. The dispatcher asked if the robber was alone in the house, and Tom told him that he didn't know, but that he had just heard 1 shot. So now, a few hours later, he was telling the investigators that he hadn't heard anything. In fact, he said that he thought that Sharon had just fallen down before he saw that shadow in the bedroom. So why would he think that she just fell down if he heard a gunshot? It was like he couldn't keep his story straight. It was an odd thing to get wrong, sure, but it also had been a chaotic night. Maybe Tom just got confused. Maybe it all got mixed up in his head. So to try and help them make some sense of what had actually happened, the police asked Tom to do a walkthrough for them about a week after the murder. They would film him as he went step by step in detail and described what happened on May 8th.
I open it up. I get right here, and Sharon's laying in the floor, face down. Her head's just barely in the bedroom, if that. And I stopped right about here, had the door, said, Sharon! Sharon! About right here, when I was like this, I was trying to kind of get a view. I thought I just seen like a shadow or something over this way. And I remembered that there's the 9mm right up here, because earlier I'd taken all my guns, put them in a suitcase, was going to take them to Utah and switch the guns around. I reached right up here, got the gun, and as I got the gun, there's also an extra clip. There's a few up there, but I got the gun and the clip.
Show us in there where it's at.
Like that, and about that time, he's right up on me. Just right up on me. And we actually touched right about here. And he's short. And when I don't know if he gave me an elbow, but as we came around like that, I was kind of coming out. I was actually going to try to be slow, and look out, but it just happened too quick. We came up and he kind of banged into me about right here. And then he went over to about right here, and somewhere along here, I bit my mouth or something, trying to say something like, what the fuck, or something. And he looked kind of like, and I don't know if he was looking in here to see if there was somebody pushed up on me a little bit. And that's when I just pushed him, boom, boom, boom. And he started going out toward the shed. I don't know how many times I shot him, but I just kept right on going. Boom! Fire extinguisher fell down. I didn't know what it was, but it made a loud clunk. And I was kind of, like I said, I was kind of looking back, because I don't hear well, and I can't tell depth perception, anything. And when I heard the noise, I was kind of, like I said, backing up and kind of trying to make sure there's nothing else going on. And when I heard that noise, it really did scare me. And I, boom, boom! Except the door didn't come down. It had stayed just like it was open. I actually got close. Boom, boom! And I don't know if I shot him once, I shot him twice, and then started coming back down this way. He wasn't moving. Some noise. Come back down this way. And being real, just, Sharon. And she's not. Whoever said 911 and said, slow down, you're breathing too hard, slow down, whatever. And what's the emergency? And I don't remember for sure what I told him. Something about my wife been shot. This guy's tried to rip me off. I shot him. I think she said, did you shoot your wife or something? I don't remember what all was said. You guys will have to get the tape of that. I don't remember. But just said that she'd been shot really bad. We needed paramedics out here. Had to hurry. She told me not to hang up the phone. And he had on a sweatshirt. And I think he still had on the gloves, as far as I remember. But I do remember the ski mask was right up here by one of his hands, sort of, or by up here somewhere. Remember from CPR and stuff that you got to do the counterweights or whatever. So seems like I lifted this arm, kind of lifted her up and pulled this arm under and one of these knees sort of over. And kind of, I just had to jerk her. It wasn't like a gentle, loving thing by any means. It was like, and about the third time it jerked enough that she got up kind of straight up and I could just kind of push her over. And she came over, and it was the grossest thing I had ever seen in my life. And my wife that died of the heart defect was pretty gross, but just really thick, globby stuff coming out of the mouth. And I don't know if it was blood. I don't know if it was some type of matter. And I remember the box was under here and it was slick. And I tried to push the box like that back, trying to get the leverage. And there was the other gun another gun.
Some clarifying questions to get real specific about what you're dealing with here. You said that you had gone into the room and you took the gun from the shoe rack that's hanging in the closet.
And a clip.
And you put the clip in your pocket. And then when you were coming, you started to come out.
I did come out.
Okay, you are actually exited all the
I'm
way out
about right here, about right here.
Okay, so you're in the doorway.
And he's coming right by.
Okay, but then he charged towards you. How far back into the room do you think that you went?
Well, I went to right here to the door.
When he came towards you.
No, when I came in here like this, decided, okay, I thought I seen something right there. I just went just like that, got it, stuck it in there, and came back right about that. And about right then, he's about right where he is.
Okay, so he's standing right in the area.
Even closer, about here.
Okay.
Okay, and then he just kind of comes into where I come out.
Facing you like I'm facing you now?
He's more like going out, but
Okay,
he's
gonna leave.
He's looking at me.
Okay.
He's looking at me.
But he's making his motion north towards the door.
And I don't know if he's making his toward the door or more toward just coming around this way. But I'm just saying he wasn't back that far. He was about right here.
Okay, he's about here, and he's going towards the garage door.
I don't know that he's going toward the garage door. He's just going to right here, as far as I know, because that's where we met.
So if you could, not me doing it, if you could explain his actions for me, if you could kind of show what you remember him doing.
He just came up, just coming up right up here. Well, he's just about right here. And I don't know what he was doing. I don't know what he's doing, because I just turned around and got this and turned around, and there he was. He was.
Not what was in his head. What was he physically doing? What were his movements that you remember?
Just about. No, that was about it. He just walking like this, and he knew. I think he knew I had went in there. I don't know if he seen me go in there or what.
Okay.
But when
so
he
what
came,
did you see him do? If you could just repeat his movements.
just like that, just kind of.
So he stepped into the doorway and squared off on you?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
More of a about there.
So
Nah, maybe about right
doing?
there. He was looking at first. I thought he was looking at something, but I guess he was just looking through me. He seen me, then he just turned around and just kind of nope. He wasn't running. He was backing the whole time. Just keep
so
keeping
he's
an eye on me.
sidestepping.
Kind of. He's keeping an eye on me. He's keeping an eye on me. See where I'm going.
Okay, so now he's gotten over to here and he's still squared off against you?
Pretty close. I think.
What was
I just started shooting.
You fired the first time?
shooting. Yeah.
Okay.
I just started shooting. I don't know if I fired the first shot. I just shot.
Straight up? Squared on you?
Don't know. I think he's still facing me. Me. He might have been
He's
a little
still
more.
reaching?
No, I don't think so. I think then I may have already shot him when he put the gun up, but he's more maybe kind of like that a little bit. It seems like it was like that, because it was just like, it was close.
Okay.
It was pretty close. Might have been a little further. Did just like that.
Okay.
And came up here and about right here. I just thought, no, this ain't cool, and started going in to get the gun. And like I said, just as I started to go in here, I don't know if he went in, if he came out, if he jumped across, because it was just out of the corner of my eye. But I think he was hiding. I think he was in that bedroom, and he just stuck his eye out enough that I could just see him.
In the drum room?
In the drum room, yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Just enough that I could see him, and just out of the corner of my eye. And that's what I just got scared. And I said, fuck it, I know there's a gun in there. And that's what I did. I just grabbed it and turned around, and he was coming down. I think he was running. I think he was probably going to run away. And
run out the door.
Yeah, and right around in here somewhere, we actually kind of bumped into each other just for a split second.
Okay, but if he's running towards that open door.
Well, I don't know that he was going toward the door as much as maybe he was coming toward me.
Okay, so show me what you saw.
He was in there for sure. I don't know if he was like thinking maybe I'm just standing here waiting to pop him if he goes by, but he just kind of just like this, and I was right up on him.
Okay, then
right
finish
up on
the
him.
move until you see him first time. Does he stay squared off on you?
No,
or does
no,
he turn and go?
no. He's going,
Okay.
and I'm shooting the whole time. Seems like maybe about right here he actually gets turned away from me.
Okay. So you fire the first time, and now he's stepping. Go ahead and repeat his movements for me, whatever you remember.
Wherever we're doing something here,
Mhm.
and I don't know if I hit him. I don't know if that's when he got his gun out. If he just said, fuck it, I'm running. I don't know what the deal was. It seems like I shot him again, maybe like about right here. And then he started turning like this toward the door. And I shot and shot and shot and shot.
Okay.
I may have emptied the gun. I don't know.
How many times do you think you fired before you got to the door?
As many times as I could. I don't know.
How many times do you think?
I think the gun holds 8. It would have had one in the chamber.
So that's 9.
It's 9, and I don't remember it staying open, so it had to be 8 or less.
Okay.
But
So then what happens after he's now he's squared off against you? You fire the first round.
I fired once
He
or twice, fired again.
And as he's going out the door, you fire again.
I'm firing and firing.
Okay, and then
He
goes down right outside the
yeah,
threshold?
he is. By then I'm here and he's down. He's down, laying, falling or laying down. I don't
How
know.
does he land? Face first?
I think he does because maybe on his shoulder, but kind of his head turned down.
So more on his right side you're showing?
Kind of like, kind of under his hand, but like that, but laying down.
Laying down.
Because the car was further back and he's small.
Did you flip him over?
I pushed him over, with my foot.
All right, so he's mostly on his right side and you pushed him further over?
Right, to find the gun when the guy told me to.
Okay.
But I shot him before that again.
Okay.
I was standing right around.
So again, according to Tom, he and Sharon got home and she went into the house first. And she came in through the garage. He parked, closed the garage door, and then followed her inside where he found her face down on the ground in the hallway. He called out her name and noticed what he called a shadow in that bedroom just beyond where Sharon was lying. And then he went into his office and he grabbed his gun. Once he was armed, he turned back into the hallway and he saw a black man wearing a mask just rushing past him. He shot this guy multiple times as he ran into the garage until finally the man collapsed on the ground and was groaning. Tom went back down the hall checking to make sure that there wasn't anybody else inside his house, and that's when he finally turned his attention to Sharon. He called 911, who walked him through all of the steps that he needed to follow to try to save her life. He rolled her over so he could do compressions and all of the other things that are a part of CPR. And Tom got really detailed when he told the police about the process and how tough it was for him. He even included the fact that he struggled to turn her over at first. Even with all that effort, though, there was nothing that he could do. Sharon had been shot in the head, and she died of her wounds. But by this point, the police knew the case pretty well. They had been investigating the house and the evidence for about a week by now. So they started to notice a bunch of inconsistencies in Tom's story. Based on the video walkthrough, Tom made it seem like he shot Mike multiple times while Mike was directly across from the office in the hallway, at very close range. However, there were hardly any bullet casings or any other evidence of gunshots in the actual house. They should have been in the hallway or even in the office, since Tom made it sound like he was standing in that doorway, but the police found most of the bullet casings in the garage. This was also where most of Mike's blood evidence was found. There was also a question of the timeline. The detective confirmed that in the evening before the supposed break-in, Tom and Sharon went to a casino down the road for dinner. Then they stopped to get gas, leaving at around 8:20 p.m. or so. There were time-stamped video recordings of the couple arriving and leaving the casino, walking to their car, and also stopping at the gas station. They got home at about 8:30, and Tom came in just a few seconds behind Sharon, but she had already been shot by then. A neighbor across the street reported to the police that he had heard gunshots a little after 8:30 p.m. too, which checked out with the surveillance videos. The neighbor was on the phone with a friend and had mentioned what he had heard to them, so police checked these phone records and confirmed that the neighbor was on the phone at the right time. So there was pretty much confirmation at every possible level. Sharon and Mike were shot around 8:30 p.m. But Tom didn't call 911 until closer to 8:45. And when someone is bleeding to death, we know that time matters. Tom said it took him just a few minutes to check the house after he shot Mike, but in reality, he waited almost 15 minutes to call for help, all while his wife was bleeding to death on the ground. And then he didn't start trying to render aid until after he called 911 and they told him to do so. In his reenactment, he made it seem like he stayed in the hallway where Sharon fell. So what was he doing for those 10 to 15 minutes if he wasn't trying to get help for his wife? Additionally, when the very first investigators arrived, the mask that Tom described Mike as wearing was found in the garage. not on Mike, but near his body. Tom said that Mike was wearing the mask when he shot him, and he says he didn't know who Mike was until after he was hit, specifically because he was covering his face. But there were no holes or blood on the mask that Mike should have been wearing, according to Tom's story. There was also a question of why Mike was trying to rob the house in the first place. He had been working for Tom for months. The two of them had a friendly relationship. Mike fixed things around the house, and Tom paid him. During an interrogation that happened about a month after Sharon was killed, Tom said that Mike probably knew that he kept a lot of cash in the house. He recently had moved something like $20,000 to his house from Utah, where he had been living before meeting Sharon. Which, who does keep that much cash just sitting around, and why would you vocalize that? But either way, robbery as a motive, it did make some sense. It was enough for the investigators to go to North Carolina to talk to Mike's family and see if they had any more information on what the relationship between Mike and Tom was like. According to Mike's brother, Mike had been hired by Tom to do some handyman stuff around the house, and that was really all he knew. But when detectives looked at the phone records between the two of them, it looked like Mike and Tom were in constant contact for months, and also regularly in contact in the months leading up to the break-in. We're talking anywhere between 2 and 5 phone calls or messages per day for months. Now, the police weren't the only people who were asking questions and were not liking the answers that they were getting. After Colleen discovered that her mother had been killed, but not understanding how or why, she called Tom and asked what he had done to her mother. He told her very coldly that Mike had killed her. Then he hung up the phone. Colleen was horrified by the cruel way that he just dismissed her right after her mother had just been murdered. But she didn't want to cut Tom out of her life just yet, because she was getting extremely suspicious. She didn't think that it would be good for her or her family to accuse him of anything, though, without hearing from the police, not to mention that he was her mother's husband. He was one of the closest people to her, one of Colleen's last connections to Sharon. So she told Tom that they were still family, and that he needed to still be the grandfather to her children. So things were cordial for a little while, but then Tom discovered that Sharon had rewritten her will. Sharon had left her house and everything else that she owned to Colleen, not Tom, and Tom had no idea of this until after she was dead. Before her murder, she had gone to one of her good friends, and she had told her that she had this new notarized will. She wanted the friend to hold on to it and to give it to Colleen if anything ever happened to her. And we know any sort of disclosure like that is never a good sign. Well, Tom was pissed when he found out, and he called Colleen, leaving all sorts of nasty voicemails and accusing her of lying to him. He also said that he had the right to half of the house since he had been married to Sharon. He eventually calmed down and apologized, but it was clear that a bridge had been burned. He and Colleen wouldn't even pretend to be civil with one another after that. Tom even moved away from Vegas and went back to his mother's house in Utah, where he was living before he had moved in with Sharon. While he was gone, Colleen went over to her mom's house and with the police to get the locks changed, and that just further pissed Tom off because now he couldn't even come back and get his own stuff. Of course, I've got to imagine that Colleen had no regrets whatsoever about shutting him out, because the police were pretty open with Colleen about how they thought he was pretty suspicious. The forensic evidence made it clear that Sharon couldn't have been shot at the way that Tom described. The angle, it just didn't make sense. It seemed obvious to the police that Tom was lying and he was actually the one who shot and killed Sharon. But the detectives didn't think that Tom had planned all of this on his own. In fact, they suspected that Tom was involved in a murder-for-hire plot with Mike, but then that Tom betrayed Mike and gunned him down just so that he could hide all of the evidence of what had happened. In fact, a longtime female friend of Mike's actually came forward to the police and said that Mike had called her and told her that Tom specifically asked him to kill his wife. The friend told Mike not to get involved, but we know that Mike did. Mike's brother also gave police some new information. According to Mike, Tom had given him a 9mm handgun at some point in their relationship. So this was all extremely compelling evidence, but it was just secondhand testimony, nothing concrete. Not yet, anyway. We all know that people can lie or exaggerate, and even if they don't, somebody can accuse them of being dishonest in a trial. So it's hearsay, and it's not usually enough to get a conviction. But it was enough for the police to be more and more certain that Tom was involved in the deaths of Sharon and Mike. This was not some interrupted home invasion, but rather a calculated, premeditated murder. But the biggest question was why? What was Tom's motive? Why kill his new wife? Well, the answer is probably obvious, especially given how upset Tom was when he learned that Sharon had changed her will. He wanted money. And even without the will and the inheritance, Tom had taken out 4 separate life insurance policies on his wife, all together worth an estimated $350,000. And the police figured it wasn't like he was getting short on cash one day and hatched this plan out of nowhere. They thought that Tom married Sharon with the intention of killing her for money, all from day one. Then he found and befriended Mike and hired him for all of these little odd jobs around the house, basically creating a situation where Tom was responsible for a lot of Mike's income, so it would be harder for Mike to say no to any new paid work that he was offered, even if it was something as sinister as murder. So that's how Tom convinced Mike to kill his wife. And here's exactly how the police theory went. On March 8th, Tom took Sharon out to dinner, knowing he was keeping her out of the house just long enough for Mike to sneak in and wait. Then he drove her home, and he waited for her to get out of the car and go into the house. Sharon made it almost all the way into the bedroom before she was shot once in the head by Mike, who was in the shadows and wearing that ski mask. That's when Tom came into the house and Mike let his guard down. That's when they started to talk. I mean, after all, they had planned this murder together. He didn't need to hide his identity anymore or anything like that, so Mike took off the mask and then walked by Tom and headed towards the garage so he could leave. It wasn't this big, frantic attempt to escape, which Tom later described to the police. It was more casual, like, job well done, gotta go home now. But Tom followed after Mike, knowing that he couldn't have a living witness to testify that he had planned the murder from the beginning. So the both of them got into the garage, and that's where Tom turned the gun on Mike, shooting him multiple times, including a few shots to the head. The mask wasn't on, which is why it didn't have any blood or bullet holes in it, even though Tom said Mike had the mask on the entire time in his original statement. So after that, he then waited between 10 to 15 minutes before calling 911 and telling that elaborate story about a masked intruder shooting his wife. He wanted to make absolutely sure that both Mike and Sharon were well beyond any life-saving measures before he even tried to get them help, because if either one of them survived, his plan would be ruined. All to say, the police had a pretty good idea of what had happened, but they weren't sure if they could prove it in a court of law. They needed more, especially because when the investigating officers went to the district attorneys to ask for an arrest warrant, the DAs were not convinced. They believed the police, but they also could see how a jury would take Tom's side. The inconsistencies in his statements could be explained away by his shock and his confusion after finding this armed intruder inside his house and discovering the body of his wife. And since it seemed like Mike had actually shot Sharon, it would be harder to convince the jury that Tom was in on it and not just a homeowner defending himself. So again, it was back to more investigating, trying to find more evidence. And since they already had found all that there was to find at the crime scene itself, the next step was to look into Tom's past, see if there was anything in his history that helped make him maybe look more like a killer. And what was found was so much more. Tom had been Sharon's 3rd husband, but Sharon had been Tom's 6th wife. And out of all 6 of those wives, 4 of them were dead. So already super suspicious. But the most suspicious part of it all, Tom had actually been arrested for the murder of one of his previous wives. And what the police were about to discover was only the beginning of this extremely wild roller coaster case. Tom Randolph met his first wife, Kathy, back in 1975 after they met in Utah. Kathy was only 18 years old on her wedding day, while Tom was 20 years old. It's no surprise she got married so young because Kathy was so in love with Tom. He was smart, outgoing, could be very charming. They ended up having 2 children together, a son and a daughter. However, not too long after they got married, Kathy noticed that Tom was changing. The witty man that she had married was almost obsessed with having control. He wanted Kathy to do exactly as he said, and he did not like when things didn't go his way. Kathy told investigators that one time Tom literally threw a bowl of oatmeal against a wall, shattering it, all because it didn't have sugar in it. So as I'm sure you can imagine, things fell apart quickly after that. On top of Tom's weird need for control, he also started seeing other women. He was doing drugs, even selling them. So it didn't take long for Kathy to feel very afraid of her husband. He wasn't physically abusive, but he did intimidate her. She filed for divorce in 1983, and she was very happy to be freed from his toxic and controlling behavior. Kathy ended up marrying a former friend of Tom's named Steve, who told detectives that Tom had asked him more than once if he would kill someone if he knew that he could get away with it. And Steve felt like Tom was trying to hint at something. And Tom was furious when Steve and Kathy got together, so that friendship ended. On literally the same day his divorce from Kathy was finalized, Tom married his second wife, Becky Galt. Becky was a fun-loving prankster, quick to make a joke, make people smile. She was slender with long auburn hair in the typical 80s style, kind of like feathered and framing her face. She was close to her family, especially her cousins. She always looked out for them and always had time to make them feel better if they were having a rough day. And basically, Becky was the leader of the family group, and everybody enjoyed spending time with her. Tom and Becky got married and seemed happy at first. But before long, the marriage started to deteriorate. It was just like what had happened with Kathy, where Tom was now dabbling in drugs and behaving erratically. And this time around, he got Becky addicted as well. And then when Tom got to sleeping around, he made Becky watch him have sex with other women. So really, it wasn't just a repeat of Tom's first marriage. Everything was also escalating, taking those problems from one relationship and now dragging Becky into more problems, more severe bad habits. Becky confided all of this in her aunt, who hadn't liked Tom from the very beginning. She didn't understand why Becky would consent to watching Tom have sex with other women when it clearly upset her. She wasn't a willing participant in these sex games that Tom wanted to play. She was forced into it by her controlling husband. On top of that, money was a problem. Throughout his whole life, Tom had always had trouble keeping steady jobs for very long. He tended to drift from one to another, and that made it very difficult for him to build up any savings account or even climb the corporate ladder to get better paying jobs. He and Becky had to borrow money from family members a lot of the time just to pay their bills. But the bills that he did always pay, no matter what, were the premiums for Becky's life insurance policies. 3 of them to be exact. 3 life insurance policies on his young, healthy wife. And he never missed a payment, even when he was falling behind on all of the other bills, not missing a single one. Becky knew that their relationship was troubled. She told her family that she was afraid to leave Tom. She wasn't sure what he would do to her. She actually called Tom's first wife, Kathy, to talk to her about her fears and get advice. And Kathy told her over and over again she needed to leave, just pack up and run. But Becky didn't know how to do that. So instead, she stayed. Everything came to an end on November 7th, 1986. Becky was found in her bed, shot through the head in an apparent. She was only 29 years old. When her family heard the news, they were devastated, and they told the police Becky wouldn't do that. She would never kill herself. There must be something else going on. But the police found a note that she left behind in their kitchen. The gun was in Becky's hand. So at first glance, it seemed like Becky, who was in a troubled marriage and struggling with addiction, took her own life because she didn't see any other way out. However, one of the investigators was concerned because the position of the gun was found in an unnatural way. Becky wouldn't have been able to hold it in this upside-down weird angle to shoot herself. It just wasn't making sense. The investigator thought that the house had been locked down as a crime scene, but it hadn't been. Tom had actually gone into the house and cleaned up the bedroom, top to bottom, new paint, new carpet replaced, pretty much everything was cleaned. So now any potential to treat it as a crime scene, it was ruined, and any potential evidence was lost. Meanwhile, Tom collected nearly $500,000 in life insurance on his now deceased wife. It was infuriating. Clearly there was more going on, but the police couldn't prove it, so they couldn't stop Tom from getting that big payout for his wife's death. A few years went by, but one detective in Ogden, Utah just could not let it go. He was familiar with Tom. In fact, he thought that Tom wanted to create his own drug empire. Well, a woman came to this detective and said that Tom had asked her husband to kill Becky for him. Tom had befriended this man, Eric Tarantino, over the course of a few years before Tom ever brought the idea up to him of killing somebody for money. But we know that he had been thinking about it a lot longer, because remember, he had been talking about killing people all the way back from when he was married to Kathy. Eric did odd jobs for Tom, and Tom paid him for his help. Then, when Tom felt like the relationship was solid enough, he asked Eric to help him kill somebody for money. Sound familiar? So police went to Eric to get his side of the story. According to Eric, he helped Tom with his drug dealing, collecting money, and doing other things. Then one day, when they were out shooting, Tom told Eric that he wanted Eric to kill his wife. Eric said no, and Tom told him that he didn't have a choice. Either Becky would die or Eric would die. Eric apparently knew too much to just say no at this point. Tom also intimidated and attacked Eric repeatedly. He once chloroformed him. He would point guns at him when he walked into his house. Sometimes they were loaded, sometimes they weren't. So Eric went along with everything because he was scared. He didn't know where to go for help. Some of Tom's drug clients were cops. They were judges. So he didn't feel like it was even an option to call the police and ask them for help. Eric did end up calling and telling Becky that Tom wanted to try to kill her. And after he called, he packed up and ran. He left town in order to get away from Tom. And within a year, Becky was dead. So with Eric's testimony 2 years after Becky's death, Tom was arrested and charged with her murder. Becky's family was overjoyed that Tom would be held responsible. They never believed that Becky had taken her own life to begin with, so now Tom going to trial was everything that they had hoped for. Eric was the star witness and the backbone of the prosecution's case, which is probably why Tom allegedly tried to arrange a hit on Eric. That's right. Despite being arrested for murder, Tom apparently decided to try to have another murder committed, because without Eric, there wouldn't be a case against him. Luckily, Eric was taken into protective custody, so he would be able to testify. But in the meantime, Tom testified on his own behalf, describing life with his drug-addicted, emotionally unstable wife. Becky's family seethed listening to Tom describe this version of his wife as this troubled, depressed mess, knowing full well that he had made her that way. So after the very emotional trial ended, the jury came back with a verdict. Not guilty. Officially and in the eyes of the law, Becky had died by all in spite of Eric's testimony, in spite of the fact that Tom took a hit out on Eric, in spite of everything. It made no sense whatsoever. Tom was released. He was free to go, and he was acting like a very smug jackass about it. Even if he hadn't killed Becky, his reaction to her death was so callous and cold and twisted, and it just really broke the hearts of Becky's family. Tom wasn't quite free, though, however, because there was still the charge of trying to hire somebody to kill Eric, which Tom had to face at a separate trial, or he would have if he had fought those charges. But instead, he pleaded down to a tampering with a witness, which is so crazy to me, but I guess the prosecutors weren't willing to risk another acquittal. So Tom was only sentenced to up to 5 years in jail. Then, incredibly, after he was released, he sued the different police departments for the investigation that led to his arrest. And they settled with him. They paid him off. And Tom, richer than ever, was now free to find a new wife. Of course, a person like Tom doesn't stay out of the game for long. And he met his third wife, Leona, and they married in 1994. And this happened to also be the same year that he got out of jail. They moved to Indiana for a fresh start, away from his dead wife and his conviction for allegedly trying to have somebody murdered. Leona and Tom were married for less than a year, only about 11 months before they got divorced. It's hard to find much information online about Leona. People don't really know much about the relationship, but based on Tom's prior 2 marriages, I think it's safe to say that Tom probably was a controlling, narcissistic jerk, and I imagine that she had to deal with his rages and his infidelity before finally leaving him. Leona unfortunately died of cancer about a decade after their divorce. The very next year in 1995, Tom met his 4th wife, Gaina Allman. The two of them met through a dating ad in a newspaper, and before long, Tom had charmed Gaina just like he charmed Kathy, Becky, and Leona. The two of them married and they settled in Indiana. Shortly after getting married, Tom was arrested for getting into a bar fight where people were shot and wounded. The police started looking into Tom's past, and they asked Gaina if Tom had taken out a life insurance policy on her, which he had almost immediately after they had got married. And that's when the police told Gaina about how Tom had been arrested but acquitted of murder in Utah, and how he had also served time for trying to hire a hitman to kill the star witness. Now, of course, Tom had not told Gaina about any of this, and I cannot even imagine how she handled learning all of that. But I do know that she did not leave Tom right away. She was still around once he was released from jail for that bar fight. Later on, when they both were at home, Tom was cleaning his gun at the end of the dining room table when suddenly it discharged, and a bullet missed hitting Gaina by just a few inches. Tom apologized, saying he didn't know that the gun was loaded, but Gaina was furious and absolutely terrified. A little while later, while Tom was at work, Gaina packed up and she moved out of the house and away from her husband. She didn't trust Tom, and she didn't believe that his gun had just accidentally discharged. She had heard enough about the situation in Utah to know that she was in danger. So from there, she went into hiding in order to get away from him. She said that once he saw her in her car and he tried to chase her down, but luckily she lost him. She wouldn't pull over no matter what he did. The two of them divorced at some point before Tom met his fifth wife, Frances. Now, as was usually the case with Tom, he wanted to get married to Frances right away, very early in the relationship. The only problem was she needed to get a divorce from her previous husband first. But within 6 months of their first meeting, Tom and Frances were married in 1997. Frances was short, with blonde hair that she always wore at maximum volume. Everything about her fashion sense was big. Think bright makeup, huge smiles. Frances was an incredibly sweet and kind woman who knew how to have fun, and you can just tell from her pictures that this is the kind of woman who will literally make you belly laugh. She had a daughter named Rachel, and the two of them were incredibly close. At first, Rachel was happy to see her mom get married. Tom was a great stepdad, quick to support his stepdaughter in different activities like cheerleading and gymnastics. They seemed like a happy family. But as time passed, Rachel noticed that her mom and Tom were fighting more and more. On top of that, Frances had been born with a heart condition and she needed surgery, but not immediately. After they got married, however, Tom pushed Frances to get this surgery, and she finally did in April of 2004. It went well at first, and Frances seemed to be well on her way to a full recovery. She was talking and eating, definitely weak, but improving. But then one night while Rachel and Tom were at the hospital with Frances, Tom asked Rachel to step outside. He wanted to talk to her mom privately. Rachel agreed, left the two of them alone, but 45 minutes later, Tom came out and told Rachel that her mother had just passed away. Rachel was distraught and devastated, and to all appearances, Tom also seemed very upset. He held her and cried about losing another wife, and when someone asked him if he wanted to do an autopsy, Tom immediately said no, he didn't want her cut up, and then he had her cremated in less than 24 hours. Now, how this didn't raise red flags with the hospital is absolutely shocking to me, but of course they didn't know about Tom and his history, and I guess they didn't feel like they had any reason to dig deeper. Frances, after all, was just out of surgery for a heart condition. It's upsetting, but sometimes patients do die suddenly. We know that it happens. Frances's family, however, was not so convinced that everything just happened naturally. Rachel couldn't understand how her mom went from talking normally to her 1 minute to being dead less than an hour later. What are the odds that Frances died while she was alone with Tom, with no nurses, no doctors, no other family members? And what was it that actually killed her? Unfortunately, even to this day, we don't know. Tom moved fast to get Frances cremated, so anything that might explain her death was gone. He, of course, collected on her life insurance policies, and he also sued the hospital for wrongful death. And he won. It's insane that he was able to keep doing this, just going from one place to another, finding a wife, losing a wife, then getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in life insurance and settlement money. Now, Frances also had made a videotaped last will and testament, which was filmed and directed by none other than Tom. She said she loved him several times, told him that she wanted to be cremated, and that she wanted Tom to raise Rachel, which just felt super weird because what mostly healthy woman sits down and makes a video will? Frances had a heart condition, but she wasn't on death's door. She was totally fine. But here she was with a videotape telling everybody exactly what Tom wanted everybody to hear, that he was going to have everything, that he was this great guy. But there was, of course, more to this story. The detectives found yet another man who told them that Tom had befriended him and then asked if he would be willing to kill someone for money. Which, the insane audacity of this man, I just cannot believe it. The man in question, Glenn Morrison, said that way before Frances ever had her surgery, Tom came to him with his bizarre plan. Tom wanted Glenn to pretend to rob their house, kill Frances, shoot Tom in the leg, then steal the car. But Glenn had no interest in killing anyone, and he absolutely did not trust Tom, so he flat out refused to be a part of anything like it. So Tom evidently then went with plan B. He encouraged Frances to get the surgery, crossed his fingers that she wouldn't survive it, and when that didn't work out for him either and Frances was doing great and recovering, He took matters into his own hands, allegedly. It's unclear what he did to her alone in the hospital room, but he finally got what he wanted, namely Frances dead. Anyway, Tom kept falling into this exact same pattern over and over again. He would find a woman, marry her, take out a life insurance policy, and then try to manipulate somebody into killing his wife. He was only successful one time, though, with his last wife Sharon and with Mike Miller. It took the police months to piece together all of this background information. They traveled all over the country talking to Tom's past wives, their friends, and anybody else who had anything to say. And finally, once they had all of the information, the detectives went back to the prosecutors to tell them about everything they learned, especially the testimony they had from Eric and Glenn, those two former friends that Tom had approached at different times to ask if they would be willing to help him murder his current wife. And if you're keeping track, Eric is the guy who was around during Tom's second marriage to Becky, and Glenn was that friend that Tom tried to rope into murdering his fifth wife, Frances. So the cops were basically like, okay, can we arrest him now? And again, this whole process took months. And it's not like Tom just put his life on hold in the meantime. You'll remember that he was shut out of the house that he used to share with Sharon, and Sharon's daughter Colleen wasn't letting him back in. So it took lots of legal back and forth, but Colleen finally let him come collect his belongings. While he was there, the police served him a notice that he was about to be indicted for murder. He calmly accepted that information, and then they went their separate ways. 8 months after Sharon and Mike's murder, on January 7th, 2009, Tom was officially arrested at his mother's house in Clearfield, Utah. At first, Tom refused to show one of his hands, and he kept it hidden behind the door of the house. Knowing his obsession with guns, police tased him to make sure that he wouldn't hurt anybody else. Tom acted all put out and annoyed and told the police that he needed the door to stand because he was infirm, and yet he was okay in videos that were recorded later. He walked just fine. So to me, it seems like more of a move for power and control, which his surviving wives all said he deeply cared about. Even after being arrested, again for murdering his wife, Tom was certain that he would be found not guilty. I guess he liked his odds after apparently getting away with things so many other times. He almost seemed happy, and when he would talk to people going on and on about how he was going to be acquitted, he even seemed delighted when he learned that the prosecutors were asking for the death penalty. He said he'd have been insulted otherwise, since this was certainly a case worthy of the death penalty. But he was also certain that he would be exonerated, and then he planned to sue everybody for the supposedly false charges, of course. The investigators were excited too. They called Colleen and they told her that finally, the man who had killed her mom was arrested. It was a huge relief. Colleen had been living in fear since Sharon's murder, terrified of what Tom might do to her or her family. So she had a party to celebrate his arrest. Now, when it came time to lawyer up, Tom wanted the lawyers from the O.J. Simpson Vegas robbery trial, and he got Gabe Grasso. Gabe told his new client not to talk to anyone. He honestly believed that as long as Tom didn't actively confess to hiring Mike, they would be able to convince the jury that Tom's original story was the accurate one, the one where Tom and Sharon went to dinner, came back, a robber killed Sharon, and then Tom killed this robber as he tried to flee. But if Tom started running his mouth, he might make himself look guilty after all. And this is just my opinion, but knowing what Gabe has said about Tom, I don't think that he liked him very much. I don't think any of his lawyers really liked him. And Gabe said that Tom tried to act more like a co-counsel, not a defendant, and that he came off as just overly confident. Maybe that's because Tom has worked as a paralegal and was supposedly trying to become a lawyer himself. Given his history of being controlling, he probably thought he knew better than the real lawyers and maybe wanted to have more of a say in his case. Gabe didn't say it in so many words that he found Tom obnoxious and annoying, but I feel like it is clear, and honestly, I don't blame him. Tom is obnoxious, and that's being very, very generous, more than he deserves. Then, after working with Tom for about 4 months, Gabe withdrew from the case because Tom apparently had no money to pay him. He had spent all of that cash that he had gotten from his lawsuits and insurance policies, which is horrifying because what was he spending that money on? It's insane. This meant that Tom now had to hire new lawyers too, which meant that there was a huge delay before his trial could begin. From the beginning of the trial, the biggest issue for both sides was the previous murder case for Becky. The prosecutors argued that her case was relevant. It was so similar to what happened to Sharon. The jury had to hear about it to learn about the pattern with Tom. Of course, the defense didn't want anybody mentioning her murder trial, or as they called it, the Utah case, because according to them, Tom had been acquitted, so it wasn't fair to bring this unrelated case that might bias the jury. Well, the judge decided to allow it, which was a huge blow for Tom and for his lawyers. He ended up firing his entire legal team over it, which meant that the trial was delayed again, which was actually pretty bad news for Tom. His lawyers had been telling him the whole time not to talk to the press because he might say something that would hurt his case. But now, Tom agreed to do an interview with Dateline. On camera, he talked about his first marriage to Kathy, and he took responsibility for it going so poorly. He admitted that he was doing too many drugs. Tom said that his second wife, Becky, was, quote, the perfect wife who would do anything, but she was depressed. According to Tom, he told her that he was sick of listening to her talk about killing herself and that if she wanted to do it so badly, she should just go for it. He even offered her some rope, which I know, what the heck? Like, did he think that saying that would somehow make him look better? He said that he regretted that conversation, but, he also probably killed her, so who even knows if this whole exchange actually happened, just my opinion. In the interviews, Tom said Leona was a party animal, and that Gaina was lying about the gun going off and nearly hitting her. He also said that he loved Frances, but he wasn't surprised that she died. She had a heart condition, of course. And the video will? They wanted to be sure that their daughter would be okay if the surgery didn't go so well. So basically, Tom made it sound like he was just being careful, not this money-hungry killer. And finally, when it came to his wife, Sharon, wife number 6, Tom said that Sharon was just a lovely woman who he missed. So while he didn't exactly knock the Dateline interview out of the park, he didn't implicate himself or anything either. There was a lot up in the air leading up to the trial, which just kept getting delayed again and again. It didn't start until 2017, 8 years after he was arrested. And a lot of those delays were because Tom kept hiring and firing lawyers. Sharon's family members thought that Tom was trying to control the entire process. Like the trial would begin when he was good and ready for it. And if he didn't want to start yet and his court date was coming up, he would just throw a wrench in the whole process with another firing. This was a case that took 10 years to investigate and prosecute, and it was over 30 years in the making, if you count from Becky's death in 1986. Tom had left a path of devastation in his wake, going from state to state, wife to wife. Everyone who worked on this case was determined. Tom would not be leaving jail this time. So jumping ahead to the summer of 2017, which is finally when the trial began. Each side gave their opening statements. Keep in mind, this trial was just about Sharon and Mike's murders. All of Tom's other wives' deaths only ever came up to help establish a pattern on Tom's part. The prosecutor said that Tom had planned everything. He brought in Mike to stage the break-in gone wrong, then he killed Mike to cover his tracks. The defense said that the crime was just what it looked like. Mike was a bad guy who robbed Tom and Sharon, killed Sharon before Tom then shot him in self-defense. There were lots of witnesses, including Tom's surviving ex-wives, also Sharon's friends, Eric, Sharon and Tom's neighbor who heard the gunshots, and the daughter Colleen. Experts and detectives testified about all of the things that they had discovered about Tom during their investigation. They especially hit hard on the motive, the life insurance money, and how he would try to get people to kill his wives for him. First Eric, then Glenn, then Mike. So after they heard all of the evidence, the jury took 2 days to deliberate. Then they had their verdict. Tom was guilty of the murders of Sharon and Mike. During the sentencing trial, there were even more witnesses, and they came forward for both sides. Tom's mother and both of his children begged for his life and for him to not get the death penalty, and Tom also spoke out on his own behalf. But after just a few days, on July 5th, 2017, the jury sentenced him to death. So finally, at the age of 62 years old, Tom was being held responsible for at least 2 of the deaths that he was responsible for. And hopefully this brought some kind of peace to the families of Becky and Frances too, and even the families of Kathy, Leona, and Gaina. Now with any death sentence case, there are automatic appeals. And Tom's appeal worked through the Nevada court system over the next 3 years until finally a very stunning decision in 2020 happened. His verdict was overturned. It came back to that issue that I mentioned before. The defense didn't want Becky's murder trial to come up during Sharon's trial. They thought that it violated laws that are supposed to prevent prosecutors from talking about a defendant's previous crimes in a current, unrelated case. A judge thought it wasn't fair that Becky was mentioned at all, so they ruled that Tom would get a retrial. That trial began in August of 2023. This time, the trial focused specifically on Sharon and Mike, and they focused primarily on testimony from the night that they were murdered. The prosecution called in Mike's family to talk about what they knew about Tom and Mike's relationship, and also how Mike was pulled into Tom's orbit and his evil plan. There was also a new witness, a woman named Elizabeth, who was Tom's girlfriend off and on for the entirety of his marriage to Sharon, which means that Tom was cheating on Sharon basically the entire time that they were married. Tom and Elizabeth had met online and had a long-distance relationship while Tom was living and married to Sharon in Las Vegas. Even before he was able to try and convince her to marry him, he told Elizabeth to take out a life insurance policy, although he would only receive half the benefits, which, again, the audacity of this man, it's unbelievable. In 2008, Elizabeth told Tom she wouldn't be doing the long-distance thing anymore, so he needed to make a choice, and he told her that he would take care of Sharon and then be with her, which I have no doubt in my mind that if he and Elizabeth had gotten married immediately, he probably would have taken out a few more insurance policies out on her, and she probably would have had an unfortunate accident too. So the second trial lasted for 10 days, and once again, the jury only deliberated for 2 days before finding Tom guilty of all charges, including 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder and 2 counts of murder in the first degree. Now, by now, Tom was quite a bit older, and he also was not in the best health. So the prosecutors decided not to seek the death penalty because of his age. Months later, on April 24th, 2024, the jury sentenced him to at least 60 years in prison. And since he is 68 years old, that pretty much means he will never get out of jail again. Poor Colleen celebrated the verdict again and was glad that Tom had been found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. I guess we'll never know for sure what happened to Becky and Francis, but I personally just don't see any possible way that Tom was not involved in their deaths. It's just too big of a coincidence. He was a man of habit, and his habit was tricking women into marrying him, taking out life insurance policies, and then killing them and getting a bunch of money. Most of his marriages only lasted 2 or 3 years before his wives died or left him. His marriages to Kathy and Francis lasted longer, but that's because there were children involved. Tom had lots of expensive habits and toys, drugs, motorcycles, hobbies like scuba diving and taking trips. Given all the life insurance payouts and the lawsuits that he filed, Tom probably over time made over $1 million, probably multiple millions. And yet he had no money to pay for a lawyer for his murder trial, which means what was he doing with all of that money? This case is horrifying on so many levels. Tom absolutely ruined the lives of dozens of people, not just his wives and other victims like Mike, but also everybody who loved them. Think of the people like his ex-wife Gaina and his former friend Eric, both of whom went into hiding because they were so afraid of what Tom might do to them. And the families of the women that he hurt are still grieving. It's been decades, but Becky's family, especially her cousins, still miss her terribly, and they wonder what she would have been like if she had survived. Colleen and Rachel have to live without their mother, who were their best friends, and I hate that Tom got to live so many years as a free man. Finally, justice has been served. Tom will rot in jail, and his victims can finally breathe easy knowing this violent man is off the streets. He can try to manipulate all the people he wants, but he is not leaving prison. He's right where he belongs, and it will also be where he dies. Since his trial and his sentence, he has officially been dubbed as the Black Widower, and I cannot think of a better name than that. Thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode, and until the next one, stay safe.